Get your hands off her. That's what nobody in that lobby said. Not one person. A security guard has his finger an inch from a homeless girl's face. She's 17. She hasn't eaten today. And she's holding a suitcase that isn't hers, in a building she has no business being in according to every single person watching. Nobody knows what's actually inside that suitcase. Nobody knows she walked into that lobby on purpose when she could have vanished into any alley in the city and never been found. Nobody knows that 40 feet behind them, stepping off an elevator, is the one man alive who can tell them what really happened. And he's not moving, he's not saying a word. He's just watching a girl the whole room has already decided is guilty, and something on his face is starting to change. Because Donald Terrio knows something none of them do. That bag doesn't belong to her. It belongs to him, and she's the only reason he still has it. 36 hours earlier, none of this had happened yet. Rosie Stewart didn't know his name. She didn't know what was zipped inside that case, or what it would cost her to bring it back. All she knew was one rule she'd never broken, and tonight she was about to break it. Rosie kept 4 rules, and she'd kept every one of them for 11 months straight. Rule 1. Never sleep in the same spot 2 nights running. Rule 2. Never carry more than you can drop and run from. Rule 3. Never let anyone see your face when you're eating people. Remember hunger, and remembering leads to questions. Rule 4. The one that mattered most. Never touch anything that isn't yours. Not a drop 20 on the sidewalk. Not a phone left on a cafe table. Nothing. Because the day she got caught with something that wasn't hers, that was the day some cop or shelter worker decided her whole story for her, and she'd spent too long clawing her way out of other people's stories to hand them a new one for free. She washed her face every morning at the sink in the public library on 4th, 3 minutes before a security guard named Pruitt did his 7 a.m. sweep. She knew his schedule better than he did. She knew which grates blew warm air after midnight, which diner let her sit in the back booth if she ordered the $2.99 coffee and nursed it for 2 hours, which church basement gave out granola bars on Tuesdays without asking your name. None of it was luck. All of it was work, the kind of work that never shows up on a resume, the kind where the only proof you did your job well is that you're still alive to do it again tomorrow. She hadn't always been like this. There was a version of her, 14 years old, who used to believe a teacher when she said, "Tell me what's really going on at home." Rosie told her. Told her everything, the group home, the foster placement before that where things happened she still couldn't put into full sentences, the caseworker who kept losing her file. The teacher wrote it all down, meant well, escalated it up some chain of people who were supposed to help. 2 weeks later, Rosie was moved to a new placement 3 counties away, no warning, out of a home where at least she'd learned which floorboards creaked. Nobody asked if that was what she wanted. Nobody asked her anything again. That was the last time she told an adult the truth about anything that mattered. 14-year-old Rosie believed telling the truth got you saved. 17-year-old Rosie knew it just got you moved. So when she turned 18 in 6 months, no family to age back into, no bed reserved anywhere, just a hard date on a calendar, when the system would officially stop pretending it owed her anything she didn't panic about it out loud. She just added a 5th rule, quietly, the way she added all the others. Don't need anybody by then. Needing people was how you ended up disappointed. Not needing them was the only kind of safe she had left. That Tuesday night, the rain had that specific late October smell, wet asphalt, and somebody's cigarette 3 blocks off. And Rosie was cutting through the alley behind the parking garage on Lexington because it was 4 minutes faster than the sidewalk, and she was down to her last granola bar. She heard the fight before she saw it, not shouting. Something quieter and uglier than shouting. A scuffle. One man's voice low and fast telling somebody to hurry up. Another voice older, out of breath saying, "Wait, please, that's not... You don't understand what's in there." Rosie's rule was simple. Keep walking. Whatever it wasn't hers to fix. She'd learned a long time ago that stepping into other people's emergencies was how you became part of somebody else's story, and she'd worked too hard staying out of stories that weren't hers. She kept walking, got maybe 15 feet past the mouth of the alley. Then she heard something hit the ground, a hard case, metal corners, the specific crack of something expensive, landing wrong, and a man's voice, older, cracking in a way that had nothing to do with the cold, say, "That's all I have left of her." Please. Rosie stopped walking. She told herself later it was the word her. Not it, not the case, her. like whatever was inside that suitcase used to belong to a person, and that person was gone, and this was what was left. She knew exactly what that kind of gone sounded like in somebody's voice. She'd heard it in her own. Once, at a funeral nobody from her new placement bothered driving her to. She turned around. By the time she got close enough to see anything clearly, the younger man, hood up, fast on his feet, the kind of fast that comes from practice, was already sprinting off with a black hardshell case swinging from one hand, and the older man was on his knees on wet concrete, not chasing him, just staring after him like the chasing part of him had already given up. 50-something, gray at the temples, a coat that cost more than every piece of clothing Rosie owned combined, and none of it mattering right now because he looked exactly like every abandoned kid Rosie had ever met, just older, richer, and about to lose the one thing he had left of someone he loved. Rosie didn't think about Rule 4. She didn't think about Rule 1 or 2 or 5. She thought about the word her, and she ran. Not toward the man, toward the thief. Because if there's one thing 17 years on nobody's side teaches you, it's how somebody moves when they think nobody's chasing them, sloppy, confident, cutting corners they don't need to cut. Rosie had run from worse than a guy in a hoodie. She'd run from grown men who wanted things from her a lot more dangerous than a suitcase. She caught him by scent memory of the alley more than sight, cut through a gap between two dumpsters he hadn't bothered checking, and came out the other side 3 seconds before he did. She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. She just stood there, in his path, holding nothing, looking like exactly what she was, a girl with nothing to lose facing a man who very much wanted to keep what he'd just stolen, and something in his face decided it wasn't worth it. He dropped the case and ran the other way into the dark. Rosie stood alone in the rain with a stranger's suitcase in her hands, and for the first time in 11 months, she had broken her own rule. She hadn't touched something that wasn't hers to prove a point, or out of curiosity, or by accident. She'd touched it because some part of her, the part she thought she'd starved out of herself 2 foster homes ago, still couldn't walk past somebody else's. That's all I have left of her. And keep going. She stood there a long moment, rain soaking through the shoulders of her hoodie, and made a decision that was going to cost her more than she knew. She was going to find out whose suitcase this was, and she was going to give it back herself. Rosie stood in that alley for a full minute just holding the case, feeling the weight of it, doing the math she couldn't stop herself from doing. It wasn't heavy the way a suitcase full of clothes is heavy. It was heavy the way something built to protect its contents is heavy, reinforced corners, a keypad lock instead of a zipper, a leather tag looped through the handle with initials she couldn't read in the dark. Whatever was inside, somebody had built a case specifically so it couldn't be lost by accident. She thought about the pawn shop on Ludlow that didn't ask questions if you didn't ask questions back. She thought about how a case like this, even locked, even if she never got inside it, was worth something just as an object, good leather, real hardware, the kind of thing people paid cash for without receipts. She thought about 6 months from now, turning 18 with nothing, and how much 6 months of pawn shop money could soften that landing. She thought about all of it for exactly as long as it took her to remember the sound of that man's voice. That's all I have left of her. Rosie had heard that sentence before, just with different words wrapped around the same shape. She'd said a version of it herself, once, about a photograph that got left behind in a group home move, the only picture she had of her mother before things got bad, and nobody had helped her go back for it, and it was just gone, the way things are gone when nobody in charge of you thinks they matter. She knew exactly what it felt like to lose the last physical piece of somebody. She wasn't going to be the reason another person felt that. So she didn't go to Ludlow. She went back toward the mouth of the alley, toward the parking garage, hoping the man in the expensive coat was still there. He wasn't. Just wet concrete, a dropped glove, and the kind of empty that told her whoever he was, he had people to call, cars to send, ways of disappearing that Rosie didn't have. She crouched down and picked up the tag looped through the case handle, tilted it toward the streetlight. A name, engraved, not handwritten. D. Terrio. Underneath it smaller. Terrio Holdings, 44th and Park. She knew that name. Everybody in the city knew that name. The way you know the name of a hospital wing or a subway stop, you've never actually needed background noise, until suddenly it isn't. Terrio was the kind of name attached to buildings, not people. Rosie hadn't thought about him as a person with a voice that cracked on wet concrete until about 4 minutes ago. She didn't go straight there. That was Rule 3 kicking back in. the one about never showing your hand before you understand the room. Instead, she found a dry stretch of loading dock 2 blocks over, sat with her back against a cold metal door, and turned the case over in her hands, looking for anything else that might tell her who she was really dealing with before she walked into a building with her name on the wrong side of the story. That's when the second man found her. Not the one who'd run. A different one, bigger, calmer. The kind of calm that Rosie's body recognized as dangerous before her brain caught up. He'd circled back for the case once the first guy panicked and lost his nerve, and he came at her like someone used to getting what he wanted from people smaller than him. "That's not yours," he said, low, like he was doing her a favor by not saying it louder. "It's not yours either," Rosie said, and heard her own voice come out steadier than she felt, which was the only trick she had left. "Sound braver than you are, long enough that somebody backs down before they notice you're bluffing." He stepped closer. She stood up, put the loading dock support beam at her back so there was only one direction he could come from, and did the things she'd done 100 times on 100 worse nights, went very still, very quiet, and let him wonder what she wasn't showing him. Big men who prey on invisible girls usually don't expect the girl to have a plan. Rosie always had a plan. Tonight's plan was, if he grabs for it, I let go, I run, I make him chase an empty case while I disappear into the subway grate 2 blocks down that only locals know drains onto the platform at Bleecker. He must have seen something in her face that didn't add up to easy, because after a long, wet, quiet 10 seconds, he swore under his breath and walked off the way he came, muttering something about it not being worth it for what he was getting paid. Rosie stood there shaking, not from the cold. She could have used that fear as a reason, could have told herself, "See, this is exactly why you don't get involved. This is exactly why Rule 4 exists. Hand this thing to the first cop you see and walk away clean." Nobody would have blamed her. Nobody would have even known she'd had the choice. But somewhere between the alley and the loading dock, this had stopped being about a stranger's suitcase and started being about the version of herself who still, after everything, couldn't stand the thought of somebody else losing the last piece of a person they loved. She hated that about herself, a little. It was the same softness that got her hurt at 14. It was also, she was starting to realize, the only part of her that still felt like a person instead of a survival routine. She spent the rest of that night doing something she hadn't done in 11 months. She stayed in one place longer than felt safe, guarding something that wasn't hers, because for once walking away felt worse than the risk of staying. By morning, she'd made her decision. She wasn't going to leave it on a doorstep. She wasn't going to hand it to a stranger at a desk and disappear before anyone asked her name. She was going to walk it in herself, straight through the front doors of a building with marble floors and her name nowhere on the visitor list, and hand it to the one man who'd know exactly what he'd lost. She had no idea that the second she stepped through those doors, the room would take one look at her 17, homeless, alone, carrying a rich man's stolen case and decide, before she said a single word, exactly who they thought she was. If a story like Rosie's has ever made you stop scrolling and actually feel something, don't just watch this and move on. That's the kind of quiet giving up on someone that got her here in the first place. Stay with her. She's about to walk into the one room in this city that was never built for a girl like her. The lobby of Terrio Holdings smelled like fresh paint and coffee from a machine that cost more than anything Rosie had ever owned. Marble floors so polished she could see a blurred version of herself walking across them. Hood up, sleeves torn at both elbows, a stranger's suitcase gripped in one hand like it might try to leave without her. She'd rehearsed the sentence the whole walk over. "I found this. It belongs to someone here. I just want to give it back." 6 words shorter than that, really, if she could just get one person to slow down and listen. She didn't get 6 words. The guard at the front desk clocked her before she'd made it past the revolving doors, not looked at her. Clocked her the way store security clocks a kid loitering by the register. His name tag said Voss. He came around the desk fast, one hand already up like he was stopping traffic. "Whoa, whoa. Where do you think you're going? I need to see somebody about this." Rosie held the case up slightly, like proof, like it would explain itself. "It's not mine. It belongs to a man named Terrio. I think he works." "You think?" Voss said it like she'd confirmed something. His radio crackled at his hip. He didn't reach for it yet, but his hand drifted there, resting, ready. "You want me to believe you just walked in off the street with Donald Terrio's property, and you're here to what? Return it? Out of the goodness of your heart?" "Yes." Rosie hated how small her voice came out. She cleared her throat, tried again, steadier. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. Behind Voss, Rosie clocked the room the way she clocked every room now. Automatically, a habit built over 11 months of needing to know every exit before she needed one. A receptionist frozen mid-phone call. Two women in blazers by the elevator bank who'd stopped talking. A man near the doors already had his phone up, filming, not even trying to hide it. Empty your pockets, Voss said. I don't have anything in my... Empty your pockets. She did it, slowly. A folded dollar, a library card with a name that wasn't spelled right because the librarian had misheard her once, and Rosie never bothered correcting it, a granola bar wrapper she'd been meaning to throw away. Voss looked at the pile like it confirmed something he'd already decided before she walked through the door, like her whole life fit into three sad objects, and that was the point he'd been trying to make the entire time. Sir, I really think if you just call up and ask for... I think, Voss said, stepping closer, close enough that Rosie could smell coffee on his breath, that you saw an opportunity. Somebody dropped something expensive, and you figured, hey, maybe there's a reward in it, maybe there's more where that came from. Happens more than you'd think. He said the last part to the crowd more than to her, performing now, sure of his audience. More phones came up. Rosie heard the specific little chime of somebody's camera app opening. She wanted to explain about the alley, about the man on his knees on wet concrete, about the tag with his name on it, about the 2 dangerous minutes on that loading dock where she could have made a very different choice and didn't. But every sentence she started, Voss talked over, louder, more certain, and Rosie understood with a kind of tired, familiar clarity that certainty always talks louder than truth, when the person being certain has a badge and you don't. She stopped trying to explain. She just stood there, spine straight, case held out at arm's length like an offering nobody wanted, and let the room look at her. That's when the elevator chimed. Rosie didn't turn around. She felt it more than saw it, a shift in the room's attention. Phones swinging half an inch toward the elevator bank. Voss's posture changing, straightening, the automatic recalibration people do around money. She heard footsteps, unhurried. The kind of walk that had never once needed to hurry for anything in its life. Mr. Terrio, Voss said, already pivoting into a different voice entirely. Smoother, eager. Sorry about this, sir. We've got a situation. This young lady was just... Where did you find it? Rosie turned. The man from the alley coat dry now, tie straightened, nothing left of the man who'd been on his knees, on wet concrete, except something in his eyes that hadn't fully closed back up yet, was looking directly at her. Not at Voss. Not at the case. At her. Where did you find it? He said again. Quieter this time. Like he already knew the answer and just needed to hear her say it. Alley behind the parking garage on Lexington, Rosie said. Guy in a hoodie had it. I followed him. Got it back. There was a second guy after that, tried to take it off me on a loading dock 2 blocks over. She said it flat, no performance in it, because she'd stopped performing for rooms like this a long time ago. I came here because your name was on the tag. Nobody said anything for a second. Voss opened his mouth like he wanted to jump back in, correct the record, remind everyone what he'd already decided about her, and something in Terrio's face made him close it again. Terrio crossed the lobby floor, slow, and Rosie watched him do the math the way she'd done math her whole life. Watched him notice the things she'd have bet money. Nobody in this building would ever notice the shoes with a hole starting at the left toe, the granola bar wrapper still sitting on the floor from where Voss made her empty her pockets. The fact that she hadn't once, not once, tried to leverage what she'd done into anything. He reached out and took the case from her hands, gently, the way you'd take something fragile from a child. Ran his thumb once across the leather tag with his own initials on it. Then he looked back up at her. And whatever Voss had spent the last 3 minutes building thief, opportunist, somebody the room should be afraid of, Terrio looked at her like none of it had ever been true. You could have kept walking, he said. It wasn't a question. I thought about it, Rosie said, because she decided a long time ago that lying to make herself look better wasn't worth the energy it took. Something moved across his face at that, not shock, something closer to respect. He turned to Voss without raising his voice at all, which somehow landed harder than shouting would have. Get her some water and apologize. Voss's mouth opened and shut once, like a man recalculating a math problem he'd been sure he'd already solved. If you've ever been the person a room decided about before they let you speak, you already know what the next 30 seconds felt like for Rosie. standing there in a marble lobby with a rich man's belongings finally out of her hands, and a room full of phones still deciding whether to believe what they just watched. Stay close. What Donald Terrio does next is the part of this story nobody saw coming, including him. Terrio didn't take Rosie up to some private office right away. He took her to the small conference room just off the lobby, glass walls, a table nobody used for anything important, and set the case down on it like it might shatter if he moved too fast. Voss stood in the doorway a second, water bottle in hand, waiting for permission to hand it over. Terrio didn't even look at him. Rosie took the bottle herself. "You don't have to open it in front of me," she said. "I don't need to know what's in it. I just needed it back with you." "I know you don't need to know," Terrio said. He was working the tiny combination lock with fingers that weren't quite steady, 3 numbers, a birthday maybe, and Rosie noticed he wasn't looking at the case while he did it. He was looking somewhere past it. "I need you to." The lock clicked. He lifted the lid. Rosie expected cash. Every instinct built over 11 months of surviving expected cash, or jewelry, or something you could weigh and price and understand the danger of. Instead, there were folders, a stack of them, worn soft at the corners like they'd been opened and closed 100 times. A small velvet box that turned out to hold a wedding ring, plain gold, scratched on one side. A voice recorder, the old kind with actual tape in it. And on top, a single photograph in a cracked frame, a woman laughing at something outside the camera's view. Dark hair, a hospital wristband still on her arm. "My wife," Terrio said. "Eleanor." He touched the frame's cracked corner like it was a wound. "She was sick for a long time before she died. 2 years ago, near the end, she started recording things. Little things. What she wanted said at the funeral. What she wanted me to remember about her that wasn't in any photograph. Recipes. An apology she never got to finish saying out loud to her sister." His thumb moved along the edge of one folder without opening it. "This is the only copy of any of it. I never backed it up. I never even told anyone besides my assistant that it existed. Because the second something becomes a file on a server, it becomes a thing that can be hacked, or leaked, or turned into a headline. So I kept it in a case, and I carried it with me whenever I traveled with it. And 2 nights ago, I set it down for 4 minutes outside a restaurant to answer a phone call, and it was gone." Rosie sat very still. She understood, in a way that had nothing to do with money, exactly what she'd almost let slip through her hands in that alley without knowing it. Somewhere, a stranger with a hoodie had been 3 seconds from turning this man's last unbroken pieces of his wife into scrap value at a pawn counter. And Rosie had almost done the same thing without even meaning to be cruel about it. Just tired, just desperate, just 17 and doing math about her own survival. "I thought about pawning it," she said, because she decided a while back that the only thing worse than being seen clearly was being seen wrong. "Before I knew what was inside, I want you to know that. I thought about it for about 4 seconds, and then I heard you say, 'That's all I have left of her,' and I stopped thinking about it." Terrio looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that wasn't measuring her anymore, just seeing her. "Most people wouldn't have told me that part. Most people don't have anything to lose by lying," Rosie said. "I don't have anything to lose either way. Might as well be honest." Down the hall, unknown to either of them yet, a woman named Priya Anand was on hold with the city's youth services line for the 4th time that week, phone wedged against her shoulder, going through a stack of files that included one with Rosie's name on it, flagged 11 months ago when Rosie's last group home placement shut its doors with 2 weeks' notice and never properly reopened since. Priya was a caseworker, one of 19 assigned to cover a caseload built for 6. She tried Rosie's last known number twice, both times disconnected. That's how it worked when you aged toward 18 with no fixed address. The system that was supposed to be tracking you slowly lost the thread. Not out of cruelty exactly, just out of a math problem nobody had ever solved. Too many kids, too few workers, too short a runway before you turned 18, and the whole safety net, thin as it already was, simply stopped applying to you by law. Priya didn't know yet that the girl on the other end of that disconnected number was 2 floors below her, sitting in a glass conference room with one of the wealthiest men in the city. She just knew, the way she knew about hundreds of kids just like Rosie, that somewhere out there, a 17-year-old was 6 months from a birthday that would end every form of help she currently qualified for, with no plan waiting on the other side of it. Because turning 18 doesn't hand you an apartment, it hands you a form letter. Back in the conference room, Terrio closed the case gently, both hands like he was tucking someone in. "I want to do something for you," he said. "Not a reward. I don't mean cash shoved in an envelope. I mean actually do something." Rosie felt her whole body go tight the way it always did at that sentence. The exact sentence that had cost her a photograph of her mother once. The exact sentence adults used right before they rearranged her life without asking. "I didn't bring it back so you'd owe me something." "I know," Terrio said. "That's exactly why I want to." Rosie didn't answer. She looked at the case, at the small dent near the handle, at the man across from her who'd just shown her the most private grief he owned without flinching, and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in 11 months, which was the terrifying possibility that maybe, this once, somebody meant it. If you've ever had someone try to help you the moment right after you finally let your guard down, you know exactly how hard that next sentence is to hear. Rosie wasn't ready to say yes. She wasn't sure she'd ever be ready. But for the first time since she started counting rules just to survive the week, she didn't say no either, and that silence was about to change everything. Rosie went back to the streets that night. She didn't take a car Terrio offered, didn't take the folded bill he tried to press into her hand at the door, and she definitely didn't take the business card with a private number written on the back in pen. She took the granola bar he'd had someone run out for, because turning down food felt like a different kind of stubborn than turning down money. And she told him she'd think about it. That was all she could give him. Thinking about it was already more than she'd let herself do for anyone in 11 months. 3 days passed. Rosie kept her rules, slept in a different spot each night, ate with her back to the wall, didn't tell anyone where the last 3 days had taken her. But something had shifted, small and stubborn, like a splinter she couldn't stop running her tongue over. She kept thinking about the photograph of Eleanor laughing at something outside the frame. She kept thinking about Terrio's hands going still over the velvet box. She kept thinking, mostly, about the fact that he hadn't offered her money first. He'd offered her the truth first about what was inside that case, before he'd offered her anything at all, and nobody had ever done that with Rosie before, told her something real before asking something of her. On the 4th day, Priya Anand finally found her. Not through the system had lost Rosie's trail months ago, but because Terrio had quietly asked his assistant to make some calls, cross-reference a name against every youth caseworker in the borough, and Priya's name came back attached to a file that hadn't been updated since a group home closed its doors without warning. She found Rosie outside the library on 4th, recognized her from an old intake photo, and didn't come at her with clipboard energy. She just sat down on the curb next to her, uninvited, and said, "I've had your file open on my desk for 4 months and I couldn't find you. I'm sorry it took this long." Rosie didn't trust her right away. Rosie didn't trust anybody right away. But Priya didn't push, didn't promise anything she couldn't deliver. Just laid it out plain, the exact math of what happens at 18, how the state stops covering you the day you turn a number on a calendar, how a shelter bed doesn't count as an address on a rental application, how you can't get most entry-level jobs without a mailing address, and can't get a mailing address without an apartment, and can't get an apartment without a job. A circle built, not by accident, but by nobody ever being asked to fix it. "It's not your fault," Priya said. "People think it is. They think if you're still out here at 17, you did something wrong. Mostly what happened is the paperwork moved faster than the people meant to catch you." Rosie sat with that a long time. It was the first time anyone had explained her own situation to her like a system with a shape, instead of like a character flaw she was supposed to be ashamed of. It was Priya, in the end, who suggested the meeting. Not a favor. Not a rescue. A conversation, 3 people at a table, her, Rosie, and Terrio, about what actual, structured help could look like. Transitional housing paperwork that didn't disappear when a caseworker's caseload got too heavy. A part-time position at Terrio Holdings that Rosie would have to interview for like anyone else. No charity attached. Tuition assistance tied to an actual enrollment plan Rosie built herself. Terrio didn't design any of it alone in a boardroom and hand it down. He let Priya run the meeting. He mostly listened. The lobby scene happened almost by accident. Terrio had asked Rosie to come back to the building to sign the paperwork, and it happened to be the same week the video of her being accused grainy phone footage. Voss's voice, loud and certain, had made its way onto somebody's social feed, stitched together with captions guessing at what kind of girl steals a suitcase from a billionaire. By the time Rosie walked back through those marble doors, half the office already had opinions about her that had nothing to do with who she actually was. Terrio met her by the front desk this time, in full view of the same receptionist, the same two women from the elevator bank, Voss standing near the security station pretending to check a clipboard he wasn't reading. Terrio didn't pull Rosie into a side room. He stood right where the accusation had happened 3 days earlier and said, loud enough for the lobby to hear, I want to correct something that happened in this room. The room went quiet the way rooms do when somebody with actual power starts talking about accountability instead of profit. This young woman recovered something of mine from an act of theft, at real risk to herself, and returned it to me without asking for anything in return. She was accused in this lobby of the exact crime she'd actually stopped. That accusation was wrong, and it happened because of what people assumed the second they saw her, not because of anything she did. He turned to Voss directly. You owe her an apology. Not because I'm telling you to, because it's true. Voss's apology when it came was stiff and short and didn't quite reach his eyes, the kind of apology given because a boss is standing there, not because a heart changed. Rosie noticed. She accepted it anyway, not because she believed it was sincere, but because she decided a long time ago that waiting around for people to feel the right way about you was its own kind of trap, and she wasn't interested in that trap anymore. What actually mattered happened after, at the small conference table, papers spread out between the three of them. Terrio slid a folder across the transitional housing agreement, the job offer, the tuition plan, and waited. He didn't push it closer. He didn't fill the silence. Rosie looked at it a long time. Then she picked up the pen herself. I'm not doing this because I need saving, she said, signing the first line. I'm doing it because for once somebody asked me what I actually needed instead of deciding for me. Terrio nodded like that was exactly the answer he'd been hoping for and hadn't dared expect. Somewhere in that building, on somebody's desk, was a photograph of a laughing woman with a hospital wristband, safe now, undamaged, because a homeless 17-year-old girl had refused to let a stranger's grief disappear into a pawnshop drawer. And somewhere on Rosie's side of the table, for the first time in almost a year, was a piece of paper with her own name on it that didn't feel like it was being written by somebody else. If this story moved you even a little, don't just scroll past and forget her by tomorrow, somewhere near you right now. There's a kid keeping the exact same rules Rosie kept, and nobody's asked them what they actually need yet. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. And if you want more stories like Rosie's, stay close, because this isn't the last one.